A man writes a check for $47,000 on a Tuesday in September, and the marina broker shakes his hand and calls him captain. The brokerage fee, 6% paid by the seller, is already built into that asking price, so the buyer never sees it as a separate line. He does not know that the surveyor the broker recommended receives referral business from that same brokerage. He does not know that the insurance agent who called him that morning shares a building with the financing desk. He does not know that the slip lease he signs that afternoon carries an automatic annual escalator buried in paragraph 9 of an exhibit nobody handed him. $47,000. That is the number he will tell people at dinner for the rest of the year. It is also the smallest number in the story. The real cost of that boat over 5 years will land somewhere between $110,000 and $160,000, depending on where it is kept, how often it is used, and how much the owner understood before he signed anything. The $47,000 is the admission price. What it admits him to is a financial relationship whose terms he has not yet read. The boat is not the asset. The boat is the collateral. He is the product. This is not one problem. It is a layered structure with at least 7 moving parts: acquisition, financing, slip rental, insurance, maintenance, storage, and disposition. And each part is engineered to extract value from someone who has not done the arithmetic. The question that governs everything that follows is this one. In a boat ownership transaction, who actually captures the money? And is it ever the person who believed they were buying freedom? That question has a precise answer, and it cannot be given honestly until the full ledger has been opened and every entry examined. The answer is not what the handshake suggested, but before the ledger, the dream. Because the dream is not invented. It is real, it is earned, and it deserves to be understood on its own terms before the numbers arrive to do their work. There is a quality of light on the water at 6 in the morning that has no equivalent on land. It sits flat and silver on the surface, and it moves, and standing on a deck in that light, coffee in one hand, the other resting on a combing still damp with dew, engine idling below your feet at a frequency that is less sound than pressure, produces a sensation that is genuinely difficult to replicate by any other means available to a person who has retired and has time. The boat ownership dream is not sold with specifications. It is sold with that light. It is sold with the vocabulary that surrounds it. You do not buy a boat. You take delivery of a vessel. The dock is a berth. The parking space is a slip. The salesman is a broker, and he speaks to you about range and draft and beam as though you have always known these words, which creates, in a way that is not nothing, the sensation of having arrived somewhere you belong. The dream comes layered. There is the clothing, foul weather gear worn in fine weather, because the identity does not stop at the waterline. There is the provisioning ritual, carrying ice and wine and fresh provisions aboard as though departure is imminent and consequential. There is the specific social register of serious boat people in which the boat is never quite finished, always being improved, always one season away from being exactly right. And this turns out to be one of the financial mechanisms, but that is for later. Most powerfully, there is the retirement narrative itself, which is specific and earned and hard to argue with. This is what 40 years of working produces on the other side. This is the version of yourself you are building toward. And a boat is its most legible emblem. Not a car, not a watch, not a second house in a warmer climate. Those are things you already have categories for. A boat is a capability. It means you can leave, any morning, in any direction, under your own command. The decision is made not with a spreadsheet, but with that feeling which is entirely human and nearly universal among the people who end up owning a boat and then selling one. The commitment, the signed purchase agreement, the wire transfer, the handshake on the dock, happens inside the dream with the arithmetic explicitly deferred. The numbers will work themselves out. Everyone says so. The water is right there. Now the ledger. 3 numbers, derived in sequence, because watching the arithmetic build is more useful than trusting a total someone else computed. The first number is slip rental and storage, the cost of keeping the vessel somewhere it will not sink, rust, foul, or be impounded. In most mid-tier coastal and freshwater lake markets, This runs between 15 and 30% of the vessel's purchase price annually. Apply that range to a $47,000 boat. Between $7,000 and $14,000 per year for a berth. Over 5 years before the engine has been started more than a dozen times, that figure accumulates to between $35,000 and $70,000. The range is wide because location determines nearly everything. A slip in a crowded coastal harbor costs more than twice what the same footage costs on a lake 2 states inland, and most buyers choose the boat before they price the slip. The slip is treated as a detail. It is not a detail. The second number is maintenance, routine, reactive, and compulsory. For a vessel of average age and average mechanical complexity, this figure runs between 10 and 20% of purchase price per year. On the same $47,000 example, that is between $4,700 and $9,400 annually, and this is not catastrophe money. This is haul-out fees, bottom paint, sacrificial zinc replacement, raw water impellers, belts, through-hull fittings, canvas, bright work, bilge pump service, and the slow continuous attrition of systems that live in moisture and UV and salt. The first year often exceeds the average because a new owner discovers deferred maintenance the pre-purchase survey did not flag. Surveyors assess what they can see. The boat reveals the rest later and it bills accordingly. The third number is insurance, the smallest of the three, but not negligible and not static. Marine insurance runs between 1.5% and 3% of hull value annually, adjusted upward for offshore navigation areas, downward for protected freshwater use, and upward again for an owner with limited documented experience. On $47,000, that is between $700 and $1,400 per year in a favorable situation. It does not stay favorable if the navigation area expands or the vessel ages into a higher risk bracket. Bundle the three. A boat that cost $47,000 costs between $12,000 and $25,000 per year to own before it moves. Purchase price plus 5 years of carrying costs equals between $107,000 and $172,000, and that sum does not include fuel, provisions, crew, repairs beyond routine maintenance, or the transaction costs of eventually selling. These are not worst-case numbers assembled to make a point. They are the ordinary expected arithmetic of ordinary expected boat ownership in any market where boats are commonly kept. The boat is not an asset that sits still accumulating equity. It is a subscription with a fiberglass hull. What is advertised as freedom arrives with a payment schedule attached. What is sold as arrival turns out to require continuous funding just to remain in place. The reasonable person, confronted with this arithmetic, does not surrender the dream. The reasonable person reaches for a strategy, a structure that makes the numbers work, an angle that others missed. There are several such strategies available, and each one is worth examining honestly, because each one is real, and each one fails in a specific and instructive way. The first strategy is chartering, enrolling the vessel in a rental program so that it earns income while the owner is not aboard. The pitch is logical, and the appeal is genuine. An asset that generates revenue is a different kind of asset, and the gap between carrying costs and charter income might be narrow enough to make ownership sustainable. What the pitch requires in order to work are utilization rates that most private vessels in non-tropical markets never reach. A charter management company typically retains between 30 and 50% of gross charter revenue. The vessel must be maintained to a higher standard than private ownership requires, because the company's liability exposure demands it, and inspection cycles are more frequent and more demanding. Charter use accelerates mechanical wear. Guests operate equipment more intensively than owners do, and hours on the engine are the bluntest measure of a marine motor's remaining life. The insurance premium rises because charter use must be disclosed and priced accordingly. When all of those factors are assembled, the net income available to the owner is a fraction of the gross charter revenue, and the maintenance costs that income is supposed to offset have simultaneously increased. For chartering to cover the full carrying cost, the boat must be booked at a frequency that a private vessel, not purpose-built for charter, not located in a prime warm water destination, rarely achieves. The charter program does not pay for the boat. It pays for itself, and the boat continues to cost. What it actually provides is the structure of a business around the reality of a personal expense. The second strategy is buying smaller or buying older, reducing the purchase price on the theory that a cheaper boat is a cheaper problem. This is true, up to a threshold, and the threshold is maintenance percentage. Older vessels do not carry maintenance costs that are proportionally lower than newer ones. They frequently carry costs that are proportionally higher because systems age together and fail together, and parts for discontinued equipment are harder and more expensive to source than parts for current production. A boat purchased for $18,000 because it was affordable can generate $10,000 in annual maintenance costs when its raw water cooling system, canvas, standing rigging, and electrical panel all reach end of life simultaneously, which they tend to do because all of those systems were installed at the same time. Buying older shifts the expense forward in time and downward in predictability. It does not reduce the expense. The third strategy is syndicated ownership, 2, 4, or 6 buyers sharing both the costs and the calendar. The arithmetic is the most defensible of any structure available, and the social reality is the most fragile. Syndicate partners disagree about maintenance standards, about acceptable levels of wear, about what the boat needs and when. They disagree about scheduling with the specific intensity that only people who paid real money for a calendar slot can manage. Scheduling disputes are the most common cause of syndicate dissolution. When a syndicate dissolves, the boat enters the market as a motivated sale, and motivated sellers in a thin specialty market carry limited negotiating leverage. The loss is divided. The per-person cost of 2 years of syndicated ownership frequently exceeds what those same people would have spent on crude charter vacations over the same period, with none of the shared decision-making and all of the freedom. This kind of breakdown, mechanism by mechanism, number by number, is what this channel produces regularly. For anyone who finds arithmetic more reliable than sales language, it is worth following. The fourth strategy is the upgrade path, the plan to sell the current boat at modest depreciation, roll the equity forward, and apply it towards something better, repeating the cycle until the right vessel arrives. The strategy assumes that the equity rolled forward is meaningful. A recreational boat loses value at a rate of roughly 8 to 15% of current market value annually during its first 5 years, and the decline continues, more slowly, thereafter. Each sale and purchase carries brokerage fees at both ends, 5 to 10% of sale price paid by the seller, plus preparation costs of 2 to 5% to make the vessel survey-ready and presentable. An owner who cycles through 2 boats in 5 years has paid transaction costs on 3 transactions, absorbed depreciation on each vessel during the holding period, and arrives at a more expensive boat with higher carrying costs. The right boat keeps moving forward, and the arithmetic keeps closing the gap. 3 people enter the story through different doors. The first enters through debt. He puts 20% down on a $55,000 vessel and finances the remainder over 12 years through a specialty marine lender at an interest rate 1 to 3 points above what a comparable auto loan would cost him, because marine lending is a narrower market with fewer competing institutions. His monthly payment is manageable. This is precisely how it is designed to feel. What is not visible in the monthly payment is the total interest across the loan's life, somewhere between $18,000 and $28,000, depending on the exact rate, added to carrying costs of between $60,000 and $125,000 over the same period. He uses the boat regularly in the first year, less regularly in the second. In month 22, when the loan payoff exceeds the vessel's current market value and a mechanical repair arrives that costs more than a month's payment, he calls the broker. He exits ownership by writing a check to cover the gap between what the boat sells for and what he still owes. He entered with a dream and a down payment, and he leaves with a deficiency balance and an anecdote. The second enters through research. She is the careful buyer, the one who read the contracts, priced the slip before pricing the boat, found a freshwater market where fees are lower, joined a maintenance co-op, negotiated the purchase price below asking. She still pays somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 per year in carrying costs on a $35,000 vessel, because the mechanisms do not yield to preparation, only to absence. She uses the boat 42 days in the first year, 28 in the second, 11 in the third, because retirement did not restructure itself around ownership the way the plan assumed. Life expanded to fill the space the boat was supposed to occupy. By year 3, her effective cost per day of actual use exceeds $900, a figure comparable to a fully crewed charter in some markets. She knows this because she did the arithmetic. That is why she sells. The third paid cash. He is immune to interest, indifferent to loan-to-value ratios, and secure in the knowledge that he owns the asset outright. He still pays slip fees, insurance, haul-out costs, and maintenance invoices in exactly the same dollar amounts as the financed buyer, because those costs are attached to the boat, not to the financing structure. Cash purchase eliminates the interest expense and replaces it with opportunity cost, the return that capital would have produced invested elsewhere over the same period, which is real money that does not appear on any invoice and therefore tends not to be counted. He holds the vessel 4 years, sells it for between 25 and 35% less than he paid, and calculates afterward that the total cost of ownership was somewhere between $1.90 and $2.30 for every dollar of purchase price. He believed he had avoided the trap. He had not avoided the trap. He had prepaid it in full on the day he took delivery. The specifics differ. The destination does not. Who gets paid in what order? The marina, first and always, on the first of the month regardless of whether the boat moved. The insurance company annually, regardless of claims filed or miles traveled. The yard quarterly, because haul-outs are not optional and systems require service on a schedule determined by the systems, not by the owner's budget cycle. The broker, at acquisition and at disposition, extracting 5 to 10% at each end of the ownership period, which is to say at the 2 moments when the owner is most emotionally invested and least likely to negotiate hard. The lender, monthly, on an amortization schedule that is front-loaded with interest and back-loaded with principal, so that the loan balance in year 2 is barely lower than it was at closing. The owner is paid last, in the form of whatever depreciated equity remains, which, in most cases, does not cover the carrying costs already absorbed. The owner holds the risk. The owner absorbs the loss. The owner funds every other party in the structure from the moment of purchase to the moment of sale. This is not accidental. It is engineered by lease agreements drafted by Marina Council, by insurance contracts designed to price risk conservatively and collect premiums continuously, by brokerage incentive structures that reward transaction volume rather than buyer outcomes, by financing products that make the monthly number feel smaller than the total number, by depreciation curves that are entirely predictable and are never discussed at the point of sale. All of it operates in plain sight in documents that are available to anyone who reads them before signing. The information is not hidden. It is sequenced, presented after the dream and before the arithmetic, in the window when commitment has been made and curiosity has not yet reasserted itself. A boat is sold as a destination. It operates as a cash flow. The seller leaves the dock on closing day. The buyer stays. Clarity is the one advantage the system does not provide, because the system does not benefit from clarity. You now have the map, and you know who drew it, and you know who it was drawn for. It was never drawn for you.